Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a couple of games to discuss. So first things first, we're going to talk about the Mississippi State win that Alabama was able to pull out in Starkville on Wednesday night. And then we will break down the Georgia game. We'll give a prediction, and then we'll get out of here. So as I mentioned, first things first, we will talk about the Mississippi State game. Alabama does win the game in Starkville by a score of 88-84. This was a very good game. This was a game that honestly was similar to how I expected for a long portion of this game. I thought the score was going to be pretty close to my original prediction. But it really felt like Alabama, had some problems at times, but really, no matter if they had a problem or what, they were able to kind of keep Mississippi State at arm's length for the majority of the game. Even if Mississippi State was able to cut it down to one, or Mississippi State even took the lead a couple of times, Alabama was able to just find that play and find what it took to win the game. The other thing that Alabama did in this game that's really probably the most important thing is that Alabama shot the ball pretty well, right? A lot has been said about how Alabama's three-point shooting this season has been pretty bad, right? Alabama this season, by and large, has not been a great three-point shooting team. But if you look at the percentages, right, so I have the numbers pulled up here. Alabama's 33.2% for the entire season. But if you break that out into conference-only games, they're actually 36.3, which is fifth in the SEC, right? That's a big difference, right? And a lot of that has to do with a guy like Chris Youngblood, right? There was a period of time when you didn't have Latrell Wrightsell and you didn't have Chris Youngblood. And those are two of your best shooters on the team. When Latrell was playing, he was a great shooter. Now that Chris is kind of coming back into form, he's been a much better shooter. We'll talk a little bit more about his shooting because he was a huge difference for Alabama in this game. And if you can get a game like this out of Chris Youngblood, every so often or just, closer to this on a night-in, night-out basis, the ceiling of Alabama just raises that much more. This is the guy you expected when you got an American Conference Player of the Year as a transfer, right? So the big story out of last game was Mark Sears. And it was that Mark Sears was benched in the second half. And, Nate, didn't really address it in the post game, but did address it in the midweek that Mark had some really good weeks or really good practices and, was fully expecting him to have a good game. And Mark did, right? Maybe not his greatest game ever, but a very, very solid game. Mark finishes with 17, 9, and 6, including 3 offensive rebounds. Nate also made a point that Mohamed Diabate does win the hard hat in this one, but Mark was very actually close to winning the hard hat in this game. Mark did a lot to be able to help out his teammates. To me, it really feels like a lot of the emphasis in practice toward Mark is not that he doesn't need to score, but that he also needs to facilitate, right? Drive at times to be able to kick out. And it really felt like at times Mark was overemphasizing that, right? Making sure to, drive to the hole, kick out to Jaron, kick out to Chris, kick out to LeBaron or Aiden, right? And I think that's where the assist numbers are coming from. He did have 7 turnovers. I wouldn't worry about it, but it is what it is, right? I'm definitely not going to harp on the fact that he had the turnovers. Still a positive assist to turnover ratio. Just him having the ball in his hands, the amount he did, and him, moving the ball around as much as he did. That's pretty common, right? To have a game that has some extra turnovers against a good defensive team. Not the most shocking thing ever. Cam Matthews has 3 steals. Riley Kugel has 3 steals. Some guys that we know are really, really good athletes, really good defensive players, had good games. So it's not the most surprising thing. Obviously, you don't want to see it continue on, but I wouldn't harp too much on it for this specific game. Some guys that obviously I think had great games, and like I said, it really has to start with Chris Youngblood. Chris Youngblood goes into the starting lineup again. We talked about him being in the starting lineup for the LSU game because LeBaron Philon had a little bit of an ankle issue. Seems like maybe the ankle's either still going on or Nate liked the starters that went out there last game. So Chris Youngblood does get the start. And Chris, makes the most of it. The only negative thing you could say about Chris's performance is he does go 0 of 2 at the line in one of his times at the line. He goes 2 of 2 the next time, for 50% on the day, but that's not something you're expecting too much out of Chris. But he does go 7 of 10 from three-point land. And they were some of the most important threes just because of the timing, right? It really felt like the threes were hit in super clutch time, honestly similar to Grant Nelson. Grant Nelson actually only goes 1 of 5, but the one puts Alabama up by 3 at the end of the game. So it is a situation where maybe the shooting, by some of the players not named Chris, Mark, or Aiden was not the best, right? Chris, Mark, and Aiden combined for 13 of your 15 made attempts, which is what you expect, right? Those are your 3 volume shooters, your 3 better shooters, especially with Chris taking the spot of where Latrell was. But Grant does hit the 3, a really timely 3 that helps him in this game, and it really helps Alabama succeed. Another guy who I thought played a pretty good game as well is Cliff Amori, right? There was a huge difference when he was on the floor versus when he wasn't, and it wasn't just blocking shots. He does have a block in this game. I think Grant's actually attributed with 3. But the other thing is just how much he affected the people driving to the basket. He affects the final shot that, Mississippi State misses kind of a point-blank layup to go up 1 near the end of the game. Cliff definitely affected that shot. I don't know if he fully blocked it, but he definitely affected the shot. There's also a point when Alabama, looks like Mississippi State's going to have a pretty easy drive to the basket and pretty easy score, and Cliff's able to get a steal, and that's actually something that really impressed me about this one is his ability to kind of, use his hands and not foul and actually get some steals. He has 2 steals in this game. That was something that, again, what Cliff does with his length and his athleticism is definitely a difference maker. He plays 20 minutes in this game, and like I said, I think there was definitely a difference when he's on the floor versus when he isn't. The other guy that you obviously have to talk about, he won the hard hat. I already mentioned him, but is Mohamed Diabate. And it feels like every game over the last few, we've been saying, hey, you got to talk about Mo. You got to talk about Mo. You got to talk about Mo. And this one actually wasn't even an offensive performance. He actually only scores 4 points. He goes 2 of 5 from the line, 1 of 2 from the field. But he had 7 offensive rebounds. He finishes with 9 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, a steal. But he has 7 offensive rebounds. And possibly none bigger than the rebound on the free throw when Alabama misses at the end of the game to go up, or I guess to go up 2. Mo gets the rebound and then hits one of the free throws to be able to, pull the lead a little bit farther. And, right, that's one of your biggest offensive rebounds of the game. That's not his only rebound, right, but that's as important as any others. So I think that's, another guy you have to talk about. Like I said, the scoring maybe isn't as good as it was in some of the previous games, but definitely good nonetheless. And then finally, the last guy we'll talk about is a combination of like Grant and Aiden, right? We've talked about Aiden Holloway over the past few games that he's just continuing that streak of double-digit games. And a lot of that has to do with his shooting. It's just been really good. He has 3 of 7 from deep in this game. He has 2 assists. Wasn't as big of a defensive factor in this game as he has been in some others, but definitely played okay defense. But some of the guards, I think, from a defensive standpoint, were just overshadowed by how elite, and I can't go without saying this, how elite Josh Hubbard was in this game. Josh Hubbard made every shot. He really felt like anything on the floor, he was liable to go in, no matter who we had on him. At times, Alabama had Jaron Stevenson on him. At times, Alabama had Mo Diabate on him. We had Chris Youngblood on him. We had Park Sears on him. We tried all different people to combat what Josh Hubbard was able to do, and he still puts up 38 points. He was by far the majority of their offense outside of Keyshawn Murphy. They kind of had a little bit of a 2-man game going where Josh Hubbard and Keyshawn Murphy were able to get some easy rolls to the basket for Murphy. So he ends up with 18. But like I said, Hubbard was absolutely elite in this game. We knew he was going to be a difference maker. Obviously, you don't ever expect somebody to score that many points. He does go 8 of 13 from 2, 6 of 15 from 3, but that's still 40% from 3, right? It's still a efficient night scoring. Maybe not the greatest night ever, but a very efficient night scoring. And, Mississippi State definitely had the ball in his hands when it mattered the most. I think that overall, Alabama, when they have the rematch in Tuscaloosa, Alabama's going to just have to figure out what they can do. To stop the two-man game, because I thought Keyshawn Murphy was able to get just some easy baskets that you don't fully expect. And then also, obviously stop Josh Hubbard. You can have him score, 15 or 20, but 38 is just unacceptable. He's an elite scorer, and he's the majority of their offense at times. So it's not, the most unheard of thing to see him score 15 or 20. He's going to take the volume of shots it's going to take to score that. But when he's having a game like he had, and he was just feeling it for a huge percentage of this game, it really felt like anytime the ball left his hands, it probably was going in, right? And that's what you can't let a shooter get in the rhythm of. It's honestly similar to the Chris Youngblood side on our front, right? Chris Youngblood got into such a rhythm. Anytime a three went off his hand, the assumption was he was making it, right? And that's really what it felt like for Josh Hubbard as well. Credit to him, right? Alabama was not able to control him in any way. But Alabama does enough to win this game in Starkville. Nate Oates has not lost in Starkville. He's 7-0. I guess that's 7 in a row. That's 3 in a row in Starkville. Nate Oates has not lost to Jans, and just an absolutely incredible game. Really credit to the guys. They've done a really, really good job this season going on the road and winning in tough environments, and they were able to do it in this game. So that's what we have to say. Like I said, really, really great game. Alabama was able to win despite the elite performance by Hubbard. But, credit to the guys. They were able to draw down, do what they needed to do, get the rebound like by Mo at the end of the game, do what it takes to win, and come out with a win in this game. So that's what we wanted to talk about for the Mississippi State game. Like I said, not too crazy much. Just wanted to kind of go through what all I think happened and some of the things. I know, like I said, the Mark thing was kind of beat into the ground. I don't think it's the most crazy thing we need to keep talking about, but credit to Mark. He had a pretty good game. Like I said, I'm not too worried about the turnovers in this one. Credit to him. So we will move on to the Georgia game, and we will get out of here. So as I have mentioned, Alabama's next game is against Georgia. It is in Coleman Coliseum, and as much as that is a good thing, it is something that actually kind of scares me a little bit. And the reason that it scares me is on paper, Georgia has not been great away from home. And unfortunately, right, we saw it with, at times, the Vanderbilt game, especially in the second half. We saw it with the LSU game. We definitely saw it with the Ole Miss game. Alabama, at times, if they either think they're slightly better than somebody or maybe they get more confident when they're at home, have just not played as well at home as you would want them to, right? Alabama, under Nate Oates, has done a very good job of defending their home court, and Alabama this season has only dropped one at home, but it still is a standpoint where Alabama has just not played great at home, right? Some of the games you've either had really poor second halves, you've had really poor entire games, like in the LSU front. Like that first half was just absolutely abysmal from a rebounding standpoint, right? There's been a lot of different things that make it very difficult at times to figure out, what Alabama's doing at home, right? And that's something that does scare me a little bit in this game. I think that Alabama, Nate is going to be harping on this. This is something that Nate, he's going to be able to point to multiple games as to, hey, this has been a problem, right? You did this against LSU. You did this against this team. You did it against this team. Like, we cannot do this against Georgia because they do have some really good shot makers. Namely Austin Newell. He's going to be the one that most people are going to key in on. He's their leading scorer. He's the, kind of freshman sensation. Alabama recruited him, so Nate Oates and staff know his game pretty well. They did, recruit him pretty heavily. He was down to Alabama and Georgia by all accounts. But, this is something you definitely have to look at is what can Alabama do to right some of the wrongs and be prepared for what's going to be thrown at them by Georgia. if we look at Georgia from a stat standpoint and what they're really good at and what they're not, the things that jump off the page at you is they're actually a very good defense. They're top 20 in the country defense. They are 13th in the country in effective field goal percentage, 5th in the country in 3-point percentage, 12th in blocks. They have a very good defense. The other thing to go with their defense is they're actually an incredibly good offensive rebounding team. They're 14th in the country in offensive rebounding, which is odd because it's mixed with a 252nd in defensive rebounding, right? So they're very good on the offensive glass, but not great on the defensive glass. I think that's them getting back in transition. Getting back in transition or just having their defense set so that they can make sure, for offense, it's really just crashing the glass. And then for the defense, it's being more concerned about having their defense set than crashing the glass, right? I think it's a lot of them just having their defense set as much as possible. A lot of that also shows that they've done a really good job preventing assists, right? They've only had assists on like 45% of made baskets, which is, around top 50 in the country. A lot of these things are really good to see. The things they're bad at, they're a worse offensive team than they are defensive. Their offense is about 75th roughly. They give up actually a decent amount of turnovers on offense and a decent amount of steals on offense. This is something that I think obviously Alabama can have some success with, especially now that you have a guy like Darion Reed back. I'm not sure what type of minutes restriction he's going to be on, but I would expect like a Darion Reed, a Jaron Stevenson, a Mohamed Diabate to kind of get the assignment matchup for Asanul. You're going to want somebody with some length, with some lateral quickness, with some physicality that can handle what Newell's going to throw at you. Because he is a pretty big body. He is a physical guy. He is somebody that's going to take a lot of their shots, right? Most of the offense does run through him at times. He is the difference maker. If there's going to be one guy that you're going to look at as like, hey, you can't let this guy beat you, he's the one, right? Georgia's going to be trying to funnel much of their offense through him, and that's for good reason, right? Like I said, he's a very good player. Currently, he's 27th in the country in offensive rebounding, 53rd in the country in just total offensive rating. Not a great 3-point shooter at just 27%. But doesn't take an absolute ton. Has only taken 47 this season. Is very good from 2, over 63%. Right, he is a very physical, very good option, especially in the front court. At 6'11", like I said, he's going to match up really well with like a Jaron or a maybe Grant, but I think more of like a Jaron or a Mo D is probably going to, or Darion is going to get more of the assignment on him if I was guessing. You definitely are going to see Grant switched onto him at times, but the type of players I think that you're going to have going against him are going to be some of your kind of quicker players. The other thing that I think I would note is you do have some guys that had some experience, that have a good bit of experience, right? You have a guy like Tyron Lawrence that played at Vanderbilt. Blue Kane and Silas Demery both played for Georgia last season, right? So you do have some guys that have had some success against Alabama. I know last season in Athens, Blue Kane, absolutely, if I remember correctly, absolutely went off, hit some really good threes. I know this season he's only shot 31% so far. They've only got one guy that, analytically wise has done really good shooting from 3, and that's Silas Demery, a guy that's been there for a little bit now. Overall, they're a very good team. Like I said, this is a team that definitely, if you don't pay attention, they will sneak up on you. They had Auburn to 2 points at home, and Georgia had a shot to win that game or at minimum tie it. They have a very good defensive team. But you've also seen some games where the offense doesn't get there and it gets away from them. Like Florida is able to beat this team 89-59 on the road, right? Florida was able to get their offense rolling and have the defense sufficient enough that, in that game, they held Asanul to 8 points. They actually only had one person in double figures with Blue Kane at 10, right? Florida does a very good job of limiting the offensive attack from Georgia, right? I think Alabama is built in a similar way to Florida. So I would expect that Nate's going to look at, what was successful, what wasn't. When you look at a game like that and see what can Alabama do to be successful in this game. I do think that Alabama can win this game. By no means am I saying that I am expecting Georgia to beat us. However, the big thing that I will say is that it really feels like Alabama has to prove something to me. I I trust in the team. I do trust in the veteran leadership, and I'm gonna pick Alabama to win this game. And I'm actually gonna pick Alabama to win this game pretty large because I'm gonna put my faith in their ability to right the wrong here recently. Some of the wrongs just not being prepared and ready for some of the lower level teams, if you want to call them that, in conference. So I do think that is something that we have to pay attention to. But like I said, I do think that Alabama wins this game. If I was to give a prediction for this one, I think I'm going to say something to the effect of 90 to, or maybe a little less. Let's go 87 to 70. Let's go 87 to 70. Like I said, I'm going to base this prediction off the fact that I do have faith in Alabama. I do have trust in Alabama. Especially, I feel like they were embarrassed against LSU. Not that LSU is a bad team. I think that they're going to win some games that they probably shouldn't. But Alabama's better than LSU. And when you are giving up the amount of rebounds that we were giving up, and when you have players, playing as semi-selfishly, and just the ways that we were playing, that was not Alabama basketball. That is not what has had us have this success. That is not what we saw against Mississippi State, right? If Alabama's going to prove like this is who we are, Alabama's going to out-rebound a team. Alabama's going to out-physical a team. Alabama's going to play on defense. Alabama's going to play as a team. The blue-collar points aren't going to be where Alabama's getting dominated at every 4-minute timeout, right? Nate Oates and staff chart those, and even in some of the wins, Alabama loses that blue-collar battle. And it's the reason why he's so upset, right? You see a team against like an LSU in the first, it was like the under 12 timeout. LSU already has 8 offensive rebounds. That's something that bothers Nate because he knows for us to be at our potential and for us to compete for the league title, which is the end goal, we have to get those, right? You have to beat a team that you're supposed to beat. And that's the only thing that's separating us currently, right? So I am going to predict that Alabama does put it together in this game. I am going to predict that Alabama is able to put together a solid win. I think my score prediction for this one is going to be maybe 87 to 70. If you were to ask me after the fact and the game ends up being closer than that, would it surprise me? No. If you were to ask me after the fact, Alabama wins by a Florida margin where Alabama beats them by 30, would it truly surprise me? No. But I personally, think that the Florida game was a little bit of an anomaly because you had, multiple guys for Florida or for Georgia that just weren't able to shoot in that game. Georgia just did not have a great offensive performance. Obviously, credit to Florida, but I think part of that had to do with Georgia as well. So I'm going to say that, Georgia has a decent offensive performance, but Alabama is able to kind of put it together on defense as well. Alabama is able to, compete on the glass and out-rebound a good offensive rebounding team. Alabama is able to do what it takes to win this game and to win this game by an amount that is completely reasonable to win by. Like 17, 18 points is the amount Alabama should be beating a team by Georgia like, especially at home, right? Especially in front of your home crowd. That's absolutely what Alabama should be doing. So that's what I'm predicting. Like I said, I'm going to say 87 to 70. Just as a heads up, if you are interested in reading the pregame thread, that is going to come out on my Twitter. That comes out the morning of the game. So that'll come out Saturday morning. I do write those typically like a day in advance or so. So I will have that ready and I will put it out on Twitter the morning of the game. As always, those will kind of break down every player. There will be videos from the opposing team's like Twitter account where they've have some of their more important plays so you can kind of see, hey, this is the type of guy we're going to be guarding. This is the type of guy we're going to be playing. This is their number, whatever. So that is something to keep in mind if you do follow those. Follow me over on Twitter. That will be coming out there. And then the last thing I will ask is if you're not subscribed to the channel, if you please would do so. I know a lot of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. We are on the road to 500 subscribers. So I really would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. If you support what all I've been doing this season. These are going to continue, through the rest of the season, through the off season. I do have some plans to also record these remotely if we do make, a run in March, because I do plan to, for example, me and my girlfriend, I know we're going to the SEC tournament, right? So I will figure out if I'm going to I probably will just record like after the tournament for the SEC tournament. But for example, for like March Madness, if we make it to the Final Four, right, I'll record there, right? We will get everything set up, however. So like I say, if you do support what I'm doing here, if you would subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.